Welcome back to another episode of the Lavesh Pillay Show. Is Sainz going to move to Red Bull and join Verstappen? Well, keep listening because I'll get into that a bit later. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the 2025 calendar which F1 has released, marking the 75th year of the World's Championship. By the way, you can check out my social media for a special The Lavesh Pillay Show version of the calendar. First thing you'll notice on the calendar is the change of the first few races. We will be going back to Australia for the start of the season before moving on to China and then Japan. So, what happens to Bahrain, you may ask? Well, this race will then move over to the 11th of April with the Saudi Grand Prix being the very next weekend. One of the reasons for the move to April is due to Ramadan being in March next year. The 2025 season also has 24 races and starts about 2 weeks later next year, but this doesn't mean that the season will end later. It'll end on 7th of December, a day earlier than the 2024 season. All races will take place on Sundays except for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, which has a Saturday race. According to reports, next season will have 6 sprint races, but which races those are yet to be seen. And if we go with last year's date, we can only expect to get this in December this year. Now, I'm going to say that Brazil is a definite though, however, they have hosted the past 4 sprint races and F1 is used to changing these things. Before I get into the other news from this week, the Alonso contract renewal, let's get into whether Sainz will be joining Max at Red Bull in 2025. Most people complain about Red Bull being unstoppable week in and week out. Well, I disagree with that statement because personally I feel that if Max decides to leave Red Bull, the team will need to fight for a driver to do what he is doing. In my personal opinion, Perez isn't actually that great of a driver, he just has an extremely fast car. Max, on the other hand, has the fast car and a whole ton of skill. Now, stick Sainz or Norris behind the wheel of a Red Bull, and I think Max will have to work extra hard to keep his reign up. Now, Sainz has a lot of skill, just like Max. However, I think that Sainz's problem is that his team just makes a lot of poor decisions. I mean, if we look at last season, we can see all of the DNFs that Ferrari had. I mean, that's terrible. It definitely will harm what a person will think about the team. I mean, look at his performance in Australia after the Max DNF. He had a massive lead on the field, and that's exactly what the Dutch driver does as well. If Red Bull snatched Sainz, I have a feeling that it would be a Red Bull 1-2 every week, but with Sainz and Max fighting for pole each week, and not just Max taking it by himself. My thoughts are that this may just happen though, with Perez struggling to fully prove that he is worthy of a place at the reigning Constructors' Champion. Now, getting into the Alonso contract, he signed a contract extension with Aston Martin for the next 2 years. But there's a catch. The contract is actually a sort of lifetime contract that'll see Alonso being associated with the team post-racing career. It's an extremely weird and unexpected move from the Silverstone-based team, but I'm sure Lawrence has his reasons, just like his reasons for not releasing the details of his son's contract. This means that Aston Martin will have the same drivers up until 2026, unless they decide to extend Alonso's contract as a driver or they fire Lance. That's a joke. Lance is never getting fired. That's it for this week. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for listening to the Lavesh Pillay Show. My name is Lavesh.